In the high and far off times,
in the high and far off times,
we elephants had no trunks.
the elephants had no trunks.
We only had noses, mere smear noses, with which to sniff, to tell us if we'd wandered in the roses. We couldn't pick up things with them, or waltz around in rings with them.
In the high and far off times, the elephants had no trunks.
Though now our trunks must grow with us, it wasn't always so with us.
The story begins in the high and far off times. In the high and far off times.
Yes, long ago the elephants lived quite happily in the jungle with just ordinary noses. But there was one elephant, a new elephant, an elephant's child, who was full of the most insatiable curiosity. And that means he asked ever so many questions.
Aunt Hippopotamus?
Yes, little elephant's child.
Excuse me, but I know a hippo must be hippopotamy. But what makes your body so awfully bottomy?
His aunt, the hippopotamus, spanked him with her hard, hard hoof.
But he was still full of the most insatiable curiosity.
Uncle Giraffe?
Yes, little elephant's child.
Excuse me, but I know a giraffe must be giraffable. But what makes your long neck so awfully laughable?
His tall uncle, the giraffe, spanked him over his high, high knee.
But he was still full of the most insatiable curiosity.
And at last, he asked a question no one in the jungle had ever dared ask before.
I know that the crocodile, smiley and scaly, half of him's toothy and half of him's taily. He doesn't eat breakfast and doesn't grow thinner, so what does the crocodile have for his dinner?
Hush! Hush! Everybody said hush in a loud and dreadful tone, and they spanked him immediately and directly for a very long time. But even that didn't satisfy the insatiable elephant's child, so he went through the jungle to where the colo bird was waiting in a wait-a-bit thorn bush.
Have you ever heard of the colo bird? No? Well then, permit us to introduce you.
If you cannot get the answer to a question, and there's no one near at hand who seems to know,
but you still must find the answer to your question, there is always someone left to whom to go.
If you ask it of your uncle or your cousin or your aunt, and they all refuse to answer or they won't because they can't,
though it may be very silly and peculiar and absurd, you can always get the answer from the colo bird.
What is it, little elephant's child? Excuse me, but what does the crocodile have for his dinner? Go to the banks of the great, green, greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, and you'll find out. Thank you, Mr. Colo Bird.
And immediately the little elephant's child set out. East and north he marched, from Grahamstown to Kimberley.
From Grahamstown to Kimberley, what is the road to Kimberley? How many hours and how many days? How many witches and how many ways?
How did he get to Kimberly?
He had a question, he wanted an answer. He marched through Capricorn and Cancer.
That's how he got to Kimberly.
And east and south he went, eating melons all the way and dropping the rinds about him, because he had nothing with which to pick them up. And at last he came to the banks of the great, gray, green, greasy Limpopo River. The first one he saw there was a bicolored python rock snake curled around a rock.
Did you ever shake hands with a snake? No? Well then, permit us to introduce you. This is the way of the python rock snake. He curls around a rock unless he's a lock snake, a silly stuffed stocking, or grandfather's sock snake. He never uncurls unless to thank someone very politely, or else to spank someone.
The bicolored python rock snake uncurled himself very quickly from the rock and spanked the elephant's child with his flailsome tail. So the elephant's child went on till he stepped on what he thought was a log of wood at the very edge of the river. But this really was the crocodile, and the crocodile winked an eye like this. And the elephant's child asked,
Excuse me, but do you happen to have seen a crocodile in these promiscuous parts?
The crocodile winked the other eye like this.
Come hither, little one. Why do you ask such things?
It's because of my insatiable curiosity.
Come closer, little one, for I am that crocodile.
Then, will you please tell me, what do you eat for dinner?
Come closer, closer, little one, and I'll whisper.
Then the elephant's child put his head down close to the crocodile's musky, tusky mouth, and the crocodile caught him by his little nose, which up to that very day, week, year, had been no bigger than a boot, though much more useful.
I think today I shall begin my dinner with little elephant's child.
Help! Help! Let go!
And do you know the guile of the crocodile? No?
Well then, while the crocodile holds fast and pulls at the nose of the little elephant's child,
Permit us to tell you about it.
He lives in style, does the crocodile, on the banks of the Limpopo River. A life of ease midst the fever trees on the banks of the Limpopo River.
Though he winks and he blinks, as sweet as may be,
When he greets you,
it's just 'cause he thinks what a treat it will be
when he eats you. And he crawls with a smile, does the crocodile, up the banks of the Limpopo River. And he suffers, it's true, in the damp and the dew on the banks of the Limpopo River.
And though often he weeps with crocodile tears
when he meets you.
They say that he sleeps and his smile reappears
When he eats you. And he crawls with a smile, does the crocodile, up the banks of the Limpopo River. And he suffers, it's true, in the damp and the dew on the banks of the Limpopo River.
Meanwhile, the elephant's child was very much annoyed because the crocodile was pulling him very hard into the river so he could have him for dinner. And he said again, speaking through his nose,
Let go, you're hurting me.
the elephant's child spread all his forelegs and he pulled and pulled and pulled back, and his nose kept stretching.
Let go, you're hurting me, pigeons.
Then the elephant's child felt his feet slipping, and he said through his nose, which was now pulled out nearly 5 feet long,
Help, help, this is too much for me.
and then the bicolored python rock snake remembered that he still had to thank the little elephant's child. So he came down the bank and knotted himself round the elephant's legs, and he pulled, and the elephant's child pulled, and at last the crocodile let go, and the elephant's child sat down most hard and sudden. Then the elephant's child said thank you to the bicolored python rock snake, and next he was kind to his poor pulled nose, and he hung it in the river to shrink. There he waited a long time.
Why are you still waiting here, little elephant's child?
I am waiting for my nose to shrink, Python Rock Snake.
Why do you want it to shrink?
And still the elephant's child sat with his trunk in the river. But at the end of the 3rd day, a fly came and stung him on the shoulder. And before he knew what he was doing, he lifted up his trunk and swatted that fly with the end of it.
Vantage number 1. Do you suppose you could have done that with a mere smear nose?
Then the elephant's child was hungry. He put out his trunk and pulled up a large bundle of grass and stuffed it into his mouth.
Vantage number 2. Do you suppose you could have done that with a mere smear nose?
Then it was hot, and the elephant's child slooped up a sloop of mud from the banks of the river and slapped it on his head, where it made a cool, sloopy, sloshy mudcap behind his ears.
Vantage number 3. Do you suppose you could have done that with a mere smear nose? And there's something else, little elephant's child.
Excuse me, but what is it?
You can whisk your ears and tickle your toes and catch whatever anyone throws and tie it in knots and beautiful bows. And what's more, you'll find it very useful for spankings.
For spankings? Oh, thank you again, bicolored python rock snake. I'll try to remember that.
Then the little elephant's child went back home across Africa, frisking and whisking his trunk and picking up all the melon rinds he had dropped on his way to the Limpopo, for he was a very tidy pachyderm.
From Karma back to Kimberley, all the way back to Kimberley. How many nights and how many hours, how many sweets and how many sours, wagons and put them in boxes and marched right back through the equinoxes.
That's how he got to Kimberly.
And west he went and south he went. And when he felt lonely marching through Africa, he sang to himself through his trunk. And the music was louder than several brass bands.
From Kimberly to Grahamstown, all the way back to Grahamstown. How many ways and how many witches, how many heights and how many hitches, all the way back to Grahamstown.
He tootled a flute.
He played a horn. He marched through Cancer and Capricorn, all the way back to Grahamstown, all the way back to Grahamstown.
And so he went on. And early one morning, just at breakfast time, he came home to his dear families. He curled up his trunk to hide it, and he said,
Hello.
and they said, "Oh, so you've come home, have you? Now come here and be spanked for your insatiable curiosity."
And what do you think the little elephant's child said to that?
Excuse me, but I don't think you people know anything at all about spankings. But I do, and I'll show you.
And then just as soon as his breakfast was done,
He called his dear brothers and spanked everyone.
to build up his appetite just before noon,
He climbed up a tree, he spanked a baboon. He walloped the hippo as hard as could be. Before that was over, they called him to tea.
and when all his families came in to dine, the hours in the jungle are 7 to 9.
He spanked everybody all over again, and so they had dinner from 7 to 10.
And it might have gone on all night to 11 or 12 or 1 or 2 again. But everybody shouted,
Stop! Stop! Stop spanking us! Where have you learned these tricks? And what have you done to your nose?
Go to the banks of the great, gray, green, greasy Limpo River, all set about with fever trees, and you'll find out.
And so all the other elephants and all their children went off to the Limpopo River to have their noses pulled by the crocodile. And ever since that day,
We've learned to pick up things with them and waltz around in rings with them. Since those high and far off times, since those high and far off times, since those high and far off times.
all elephants have trunks, precisely like the trunk of that insatiable elephant's child.
Since those high and far off times.
In the beginning of the years, when the world was so new and all, and the animals were just beginning to work for man, there was a camel called Bubbles. He lived in the middle of a howling desert, and he did not want to work. When anybody spoke to him, he simply said, "Humph." Just humph. No more. And presently, on a Monday, the horse came to him with a saddle on his back. And he said,
Because the world's so new and all, and there's so much to do and all, upon my back I carry a load, and I go galloping, 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 galloping down the road. I do. But what about you?
and what do you think the camel said to that?
On the sand of the desert he sat like a bump, and when the horse finished, he simply said, "Humph."
And then it was Tuesday, and the ox came to him and said,
Because the world's so new, my boy, and there's so much to do, my boy. I pull the plow, gee-haw, gee-haw. I pull heavy cart, gee-haw, gee-haw. I do what I can to help the man, I do. But what about you?
And what do you think the camel said to that?
He chewed on the bark of the tamarisk stump, and when the ox finished, he simply said, humph.
And then the dog came to him. This was the third day, and it was Wednesday. And he said,
Because the world's so new, hurrah, and there's so much to do, hurrah. I guard the sheep as they run, run, run. I drive home the cattle when day is done. I scurry and worry and scamper and hurry. I do. But what about you?
And what do you think the camel said to that?
He ambled away in an awkward galump, and on the horizon they heard him say, humph.
And at the end of the third day, the man called the horse and the ox and the dog together. And he said to his helpers, Three, I have some news for you.
There's a hump-thing or a something on the desert, where the camel on the desert ought to be. But this hump-thing or this something on the desert is a nothing when it comes to helping me.
Oh, we know it, said the others. And they told him, one by one.
He won't fetch and he won't carry.
He thinks work's unnecessary.
He's a lazy dromedary when there's something to be done.
Well, I'm glad you heard about him, said the man, because there's something else you ought to know, the world being so new and all.
There's a hump-thing or a something on the desert, and there's work up on the desert he must do. Since the camel doesn't do it on the desert, then I guess I'll have to leave it all to you.
Oh, that's awful, cried the others. And they told him, 1, 2, 3.
He won't fetch and he won't carry.
He thinks work's unnecessary.
But this lazy dromedary shouldn't leave his work for me.
No, indeed.
No, indeed.
No, indeed.
Said all three, and they held a palaver. And an indaba. And a grand powwow on the edge of the desert to decide what should be done. And as they sat there wondering what to do about the camel, along came a cloud of dust whirling across the desert. Whirling in the middle of it was the djinn in charge of all the deserts. Who are you? Asked the three. I, said the djinn, am the djinn in charge of all deserts, and of this desert in particular. And as for this cloud of dust,
I'm the gin, and I spin, around and around in a cloud of dust. And so I must, because that's magic. And now, what can I do for you?
Well, there's a hump-thing or a something with a long neck and long legs out in your howling desert, and he hasn't done a stroke of work since Monday morning.
Phew, said the djinn. That must be my camel Bubbles, by all the gold in Arabia. Have you asked him to work? What does he say about it?
He only says humph, just like that when I neigh. He only says humph to whatever I say. He only says humph, just like that when I moo, as though he was saying I've nothing to do.
He he only says hump, just like that when I bark. Just hump, as though that were a clever remark.
Oh, he does he? Said the gin. We'll see about that. And away he whirled across the desert, directly to where the camel sat admiring his own reflection in a pool of water. The camel didn't see him coming, but the gin whirled up to him and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "What's this I hear about your doing no work since Monday morning, and the world so new and all? Bubbles, you are causing troubles." And what do you think the camel said to that?
Humph.
"I wouldn't say that again if I were you," said the gin. "You might say it once too often." And to return to more important matters, Camelus dromedarius, this laziness of yours is becoming serious. And what do you think the camel said to that?
Humph.
Uh-huh. So that's it, is it? Said the gin. Well, then I see it's time for magic.
I'm a gin, and I spin, around and around in a cloud of smoke. And it's no joke when I make magic.
Humph, said the camel again. But even as he said it, he looked into the pool and saw his back puffing and puffing up into a great big lolloping hump. "What's that?" asked the camel. "That's your hump," said the gin. "It's made a purpose. Today is Wednesday, and you've done no work since Monday, when the work began. Now you must make up 3 days' work, and you can do it without eating, because you will be able to live on the hump on your back. Now go out on that desert, and do your work, and behave. Hump! Jump!" And so the camel did. And forever after this,
When he sits all alone on the sand like a lump,
When he chews on the bark of a tamarisk stump,
When he ambles away in an awkward galump,
you can tell he's a camel because of his hump. Humph. Yo-ho, yo-ho, yo-ho. This is the tale of the whale.
on the sea once upon a time, there was a whale, and he ate fishes. All the fishes he could find in the sea, he ate with his mouth. So. And then one day, when he had eaten almost all the fishes in the sea, that whale stood up on his tail and he said,
I've eaten the starfish and the garfish, crab and the dab, the skate and his mate, the mackerel and the pickerel, and the really truly twirly whirly eel. But I'm still hungry.
But there was one small fish still left in all the sea, and he was a small, astute fish, and he didn't want to be eaten. He thought and he thought about it, and then he swam a little behind the whale's right ear, so as to be out of harm's way, and he said in his small, astute voice, O noble and generous cetacean, that means whale, have you ever eaten man? Man, said the whale, no. What is it like? It's nice, said the small, astute fish. It's nice, but nubbly. Nice, eh, said the whale. Well, then fetch me some. Oh, but one man at a time is enough, said the fish, and you must go get him. If you swim to latitude 50 north and longitude 40 west, you will find, sitting on a raft in the middle of the sea, with nothing on but a pair of blue canvas breeches, a pair of suspenders, and a jackknife, one shipwrecked mariner, trailing his toes in the water. Oh-ho, said the whale. Is that so? Well then, yo-ho!
Yo-ho, yo-ho, yo-ho. To latitude 50 north, yo-ho, and longitude 40 west.
The whale went sailing forth, yo-ho, and he sang yo-ho, though he didn't know exactly where on the stormy sea latitude 50 north or longitude 40 west might be. Yo-ho, yo-ho, yo-ho. But at latitude 50 north, yo-ho, and longitude 40 west, he spied the sailor man, yo-ho, and he sang yo-ho. It's really so exactly here where he ought to be, at latitude 50 north and longitude 40 west is he. Yo-ho, 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 on the stormy sea.
When the whale saw the man, he was quite pleased. And he opened his mouth back, and back, and back, until it nearly touched his tail. And he swallowed the shipwrecked mariner, and the raft he was sitting on, and his blue canvas breeches, and the suspenders, and you must not forget the suspenders, and the jackknife. He swallowed them all down into his warm, dark inside cupboards. And then he smacked his lips, so. And then the whale turned 3 times around on his tail, and he said to the small, astute fish, good. And now, little astute fish, can you tell me where I can find some more man? Because I'm still hungry.
Yo-ho, yo-ho, yo-ho.
And so the whale set out to look for more man. But as soon as the shipwrecked mariner, who was a man of infinite resource and sagacity, found himself inside the whale's dark, warm inside cupboards, he thought to himself, now, what shall I do?
I'll stomp and I'll jump, I'll thump and I'll bump, I'll prance and I'll dance, I'll bang and I'll clang, I'll leap and I'll creep, I'll prowl and I'll howl, I'll hop and I'll drop, I'll cry and I'll sigh.
And so he did. And he bit, and he hit, and he stepped, and he leapt, and he danced hornpipes where he shouldn't. And the whale felt most unhappy indeed. And he said to the small, astute fish, what shall I do? This man is very nubbly indeed. And besides, he's making me hiccup. O noble and generous cetacean, that means whale, said the small, astute fish, tell him to come out. So the whale called down his own throat to the shipwrecked mariner. Stop bouncing. Come out and behave yourself. Nay, nay, said the shipwrecked mariner. Take me first home to my natal shore and the white cliffs of Albion, and I'll think about it. And he began to dance more than ever. Oh-ho, said the whale. Oh-ho! Is that so? Well, then, oh!
Yo-ho, yo-ho, yo-ho. From latitude 50 north, yo-ho, and longitude 40 west, the whale went sailing forth, yo-ho, and he sang yo-ho, though he didn't know exactly where on the stormy sea latitude 50 north or longitude 40 west might be. Yo-ho, yo-ho, yo-ho. And from latitude 50 north, yo-ho, and longitude 40 west, he swam to reach the shore, yo-ho, and he sang yo-ho. Now home you go, a-sailing over the stormy sea from latitude 50 north and longitude 40 west with me. Yo-ho, 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 on the stormy sea.
And so the whale swam and swam and swam, and at last he came to the shipwrecked mariner's natal shore and the white cliffs of Albion, and he rushed halfway up the beach and opened his mouth wide and wide and wide and said, change here for Winchester, Ashuelot, Nashua, Keene, and stations on the Fitchburg Road. And just as he said, Fitch, the mariner walked out of his mouth. But while the whale had been swimming, the mariner, who was indeed a person of infinite resource and sagacity, had taken his jackknife and cut up the raft into a little square grating, all running crisscross, and he had tied it firm with his suspenders. Now you know why you were not to forget the suspenders. And as he went out, he had dragged that grating good and tight into the whale's throat, and there it stuck. "Yes, indeed," said the mariner, "by means of a grating I have stopped your eating." And true it was, for from that day on, the grating in his throat, which he can neither cough up nor swallow down, has prevented the whale from eating men or boys or little girls or anything at all except very small fish. As for the shipwrecked mariner, he stepped out on the beach, went home to his mother, who had given him leave to trail his feet in the water, and he married and lived happily ever afterward. The small, astute fish went and hid himself under the dorsals of the equator. He was afraid the whale might be angry with him.
Yo-ho, 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 and there